Good morning. I'm Ken Demers for Psychic Holistic Spotlight. Tonight we're going to be interviewing Joe Higgins, who's recently published a book of communication by deceased veterans for troubled veterans. I'm sure he can express it a lot better than I am. And assisting me in doing this is my co-host, Bill Hanna. And Bill, do you have a question for Joseph?
Well, I'd like Joe just to give us some idea. So what was the inspiration for you to be looking for information like this?
Well, last summer I was thinking, actually I was reading the paper and I saw that some of our soldiers had just been killed in Afghanistan, and it was on page like 8, like in some secondary column or something. And it hit me, I'm like, I don't think it's really in the eye of the public the way it should be. We're still losing our loved ones overseas. And I said, I wish I could do something to help our troops. And I had sent food before and things like that, but I wanted to do something different this time.
Right.
And I really wasn't sure. And then I remember the old saying, do what you do best. And I'm a medium, I do channel writing, I'm an author, I have 3 other published books. So I decided I'll write a book and hopefully make that connection where we can help some of the vets and civilians who have been involved with the conflict.
All right, so that's interesting. I mean, always connected for veterans. Deceased vets give guidance from the other side.
Because we know that vets will always listen to other vets,
right,
or that they should listen to other vets. I mean, they've had similar experiences, and the information would come, I thought, more legitimately from them than from myself. I am not a veteran, and I struggled when I first started writing the book, or even before I started to write the book. How can I write this book? I'm not a veteran. And after I started to write it in the first chapter, it came to me with the information is that they wanted me to write it because I was not a veteran. I had no preconceived experiences with that type of conflict, right, or that type of structure. And they said if you did, some of your own experiences would come through and the book wouldn't be the way we wanted it.
Right, okay.
So it made sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
But for a couple of weeks I really struggled with it.
I could see that, I could see why, yeah.
But I have to do it, so.
Right.
Now, I'm assuming you went into a meditative state and the veterans would come through to you. Were they coming through from a lot of different wars or just the current ones?
Well, how the actually channeling process worked was I worked with one specific spokesman who gave me the information from a group of veterans on the other side from different wars. When you read the book, you could tell that certain parts of the book are written for certain families in different conflicts, okay? So it's, some parts might mean more to one person than to others, but the overwhelming theme is that whole concept that we're always connected. And in this case, all the veterans are connected, and so that they're trying to help each other.
We'll change hats just for a second, part of the same story. You took these out just a couple of minutes ago, and these are marvelous. These are for vets who are going through traumas, and they're playing cards. And on the back of each card is a guided, inspirational
guide.
The one I picked out. Ask yourself whether what you experience is going to hold you back or propel you forward.
After each chapter, what I did was I asked the vets to give me some short little sayings that could help some of the vets here. And they're listed after each chapter. And then I decided to take all those and put them on a deck of cards so that if vets or civilians are playing, playing cards, the information might get to them much more easier than a vet who might not want to sit down and read the whole book. Or because of physical ailments,
right,
doesn't have the concentration ability to read a whole book.
Sure.
And just to mention too, this book is also available in audio version for people that, some veterans and stuff that have disabilities.
I use that a lot myself when I'm driving.
Yeah, and people love it, but also because they'll have access to some vets that can't
Would
actually
it be
hold the book.
Of interest to people other than vets?
To the
general public, say.
Absolutely, and the reason a lot of people don't realize is There's questions in there for civilians, and I think that's a subject that people forget. They forget that when the serviceman goes away, there's a family left behind. And we've heard it from past wars, but now it's very important that the veteran who returns understands what the family at home was also going through. So they bring through that information. And I think that information and awareness to the vet that comes home could help relationships and marriages that sometimes vets struggle with, because when they come back, they are different people. They have new experiences and they're different people. But the people at home are different also. They've gone through the stress and the anxiety of not knowing if they're loved, if in a different way. So they're both different, so you have to learn to be, your relationship has to have that awareness to come together and to blossom and to keep it going, because you're both coming from different things. But once you realize that, that's the first step. So I thought that was very interesting. They put that in the book, and they also put a section in there on civilians actually in a war zone, how they deal with ongoing war all around them.
Right.
Wait a minute. Say that again. There's a section in the book by civilians in the war zone.
Right.
Deceased civilians or living ones?
Living civilians, but they give us insight. So they try to keep as much normalcy as possible while the mortars are going off or there's mayhem everywhere. But they try to have the same customs and things to try to keep their life going on. It's much more acute. Now, the civilians at home, it's the distance, it's the quiet, it's the unknown anxiety. That's how it resonates with a loved one that's thousands of miles away. And that goes through all the wars. They actually have some examples of even going back to Roman times where civilians at home would get stories about their loved ones 6, 7, 8 months, a year later. Of what was going on in other lands.
Sure.
So, there were similarities between all of them. So, they did a great job. And then, for these particular healing things, I had individual vets step forward and give stories about some of their experiences in some of the wars.
Well, let me ask you that now. You mentioned that the vets told you. Are you talking these playing cards were put together from inspirational thoughts that you had received from past vets?
Yes.
Okay.
These are all from the other side.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get.
You are helping teach others due to your injury. See, another thing people say, why did I get injured? And look at me, I got no legs or no arms or something like that. I have no life left when I come back. That injury is actually teaching people. It might be teaching people about compassion. It might be inspiring kids to achieve great things in the Olympics or the Paralympics, or and things like that.
Physical therapists,
therapists. You don't know what you are creating in that ripple effect, even with that injured body you have. So it takes a very high developed spiritual being to take on the plan, to take on the life of an injured soldier.
In effect, we do choose the lifetime in a basic course before we're born.
Absolutely. So when you decide that you're going to come here and you're going to be a model for compassion and helping and inspiration, but I'm going to have to lose my legs and my arms or something to do that.
Yeah.
That's an advanced soul.
The lessons and experience of having that experience.
Right. But that person has so much to offer to society that they can't see it sometimes because they just block it out. But when the information comes through like this, that you really are going to touch a lot of lives, it's absolutely amazing.
I can relate to I've been a veteran in this lifetime, and I was a Minuteman in the Revolutionary War, and I was in the Civil War. And I still have, if I see something coming on TV about the battles of the Civil War, I can't watch them.
Right.
I was with my brother when he was killed, and then I was killed a little later myself. So
well, I mean, there were different parts for this in this book for different vets at different stages. The combat vet, there are questions in there. Why did my buddy die and not me? Well, in certain cases, he was supposed to pass, and it wasn't your time. You were supposed to witness this. Is God going to send me to hell for killing people? No, because it was part of the environment. you were trained to react in that type of environment. That's what you were there for, and you have learning lessons there and learning lessons when you come home. So there are over like 35 questions, really important and tough questions that I asked and got answers to, that people want to know, to help them with their nightmares and going on. And what happens is with a lot of combat soldiers too, we're spiritual beings in essence. And when we're put into a combat situation like that, and all this visual stimulus overwhelms our physical body and our brains, and we can't comprehend it. So what we have is, we have a crisis. We have a spiritual crisis, because deep down our spiritual body says, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to be killing indiscriminately or for whatever reasons. And the body starts to react on many different levels, okay, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it can come out all different ways in drug abuse, alcohol abuse, physical abuse, abuse to yourself, to try to deal with certain things like this. And it's an eternal thing, it's a spiritual thing.
Right. Well, I mean,
the healing has to take place on a lot of different levels.
A lot of the injuries that are actually happening right now are not just to the person, but who actually may have gotten hurt, but actually so many other people in a group, a troop, squad, are actually witnessing horrific deaths of brothers that that they've been with for the past years.
Right.
And this is something that is hard for them to go through.
Exactly.
And so this is part of what they've taken on, but a book like this is very, very inspirational from what you've shared with me, because it's an actual connection with people that have probably already experienced this, stepped onto the other side, and has been able to review what he learned before himself, what he had actually witnessed himself before, what he experienced himself before, and now is able to share it with the vet now.
And it's a different perspective.
Right.
That's a huge part, because what the perspective is here is we look at it one way, and there's a lot of self-judgment going on, okay? And the vets on the other side want to say, listen, take away that self-judgment, because you don't have all the tools. You don't have all the information. There's a great quote in there that says, it's above your pay grade.
Right.
You don't have that information. So you're trying to make decisions and choices and feelings on a limited amount of information, because you don't have access to all of it. But if you let some of it, try to understand some of it, it might ease the burden and help in the healing. That's what this book is all about. It's about healing and understanding.
I look at your 35 questions as if somebody was a wounded or traumatized vet, it would present them questions that they might normally have thought of themselves, to look at a different way of looking at the issue.
Absolutely.
But while you were talking, I had a thought. I was wondering, this book is designed to help people, not only vets, I imagine anybody with a trauma. This is going to present itself to looking at differently.
A lot of the healing things can be used in different traumatic situations.
But here's the thought that came to me. We have vets that had traumas and then were killed. Is this the type of thing that would be beneficial for them on healing on the other side? Or
the other side, when a vet passes on the other side, there are specific groups that are there to help them. And this goes for suicides, and it also goes for MIAs and POWs. They have special groups that work with those people. Actually, with the POWs,
spiritual groups.
MIAs, on the others in spirit, they'll actually work with the ones that are here, still alive, before they transition. So it's a whole transition here on
But I was talking the ones about that have
when
trauma
you get to
on
the other side, they have special people that can help you with that trauma. But also just this perspective that you get when you get to the other side, it opens up a lot of that healing, and that a lot of that trauma is understood, because it's for whatever reasons, for teaching or whatever reasons, if that particular trauma happened, they really get it. Now with the suicides, when a soldier commits suicide, and they come to the other side, they're also put into special classes. And when I wrote the book, they reminded me of, they get to see their friends and hang out and stuff like that, but they're in school a lot and they have to learn a lot of new things, because when they made the decision to take their own life, they didn't have all the information to base the correct decision on. Okay, so that means like, you're trying to make a decision with only half the information. You really can't do that. So they, and obviously there's physical manifestations and chemical reactions and stuff like that. But when they get to the other side, they realize this because they show them.
Okay. Would this book help the relatives that have
Of the-
chose to commit suicide, and now they're at home by themselves with all this grief and
Yes, and I'll tell you, because they'll understand the mind of the soldier that takes his own life, of how his perspective is narrow and limited to the point where he thinks or she thinks there's no other way out. Okay, so the family can understand that at a different level. Now, there's an instance in there where a soldier had committed suicide, passed over, and then the mother died a few years later of cancer. And she passed over and she saw her son on the other side. And when she got to the other side, she understood everything that he had went through that precipitated him taking his own life. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to see if we can get some of that information here through the book. When people are still alive, they can do it. And she saw him, she gets to see him and stuff like that, but he's in this class. And they showed the class to me as if when I was in high school and I had to go to driver's ed class, and it was in May, and it was beautiful out, and all my friends were out playing basketball and having fun, and I'm sitting in driver's ed class for 2 hours in the afternoon, and it's like the last place on earth I want to be.
Right.
But I had to stay there and study and learn in order to get my license. So it was similar, with the suicide person on the other side. They had to go to class and learn about how their actions affected not only their own path, but the path of others. So I try to cover a little bit of everything in the book. So some parts of the book will be for some people, some will be for others. It's not the end all, but it does have a lot of different facets to it. And another thing too, Ken, we talk about veterans in here. You don't have to be a combat veteran to have some type of suffering, because there are people that drop bombs that are nowhere near the actual combat zone. There are people that make ammunition in factories that think, is this bullet or this mortar going to kill someone? And there's a lot of silent suffering out there that people never even think about. And they say, you can't have post-traumatic stress because you weren't in a combat zone. And that's not true. So-
Okay. The book, Always Connected for Veterans, Deceased Vets, Giving Guidance from the Other Side, by Joe Higgins. The big computer stores sell it. And while we're on
Amazon.
the subject of ads, we would welcome suggestions, questions, comments, and my phone number is 728-3559. If anybody wants to volunteer with us to take part of this, we record on Monday nights, every other week. So we're open for questions. 728-3559. I'm home most evenings, except Mondays we're here. Thank you. Okay, back to Joe.
Well, I just started looking through a card. I picked up another one, and it's silent injuries are as real as physical ones, and we know that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right, the emotional level,
right. We learned that after Vietnam,
Mental, right.
and now we're much more open about it. But a lot of people don't realize that. So it's kind of a touchy subject, but people have to realize that that's all part of it. Do not relate new experiences with older traumatic events. And that's, a little bit more scientific. Some people will, relate certain things that happen in the war with things that are happening here. But that's more of a memory, a brain. I mean, there's healing. That's what's great. They give you the healing tips in there. Has to happen on all levels, on your emotional, your physical, your spiritual, to do healing. So be open to all of that.
Any questions, Bill?
No,
We've still got a while to go yet.
Yeah,
but,
well, no, that's great. I mean, it's interesting to get the insight, from people that have passed and are sending back the information.
I do some background in, why is war necessary, and the people who start it, and how different different people and groups of people that associate together are at different levels of development. And you might have certain societies that are at different levels of development. And those societies might come into conflict with each other over the years. And that's why we see a war on regional and national levels.
Right. So
And then there are individuals.
young countries, and
You might have individuals that are not of a higher development,
Evolution, right.
and they might be leading a group of people, of like-minded people who are just not they're ignorant to certain higher states of compassion, love, and certain things, and that can grow, and that can be a local conflict or something.
One time I was in a group, and I can't remember who it was now. Somebody was channeling Mother Mary. And the subject of World War II came up. And basically, she said it was necessary to have World War II instead of having a much greater evil if we didn't have World War II. There might be bigger pictures that we're not seeing.
Well, that's the whole thing. It goes back to that perspective, that we don't have all the information. And things happen for a reason. That's a common saying that we like to hear is, that things always happen for a reason, even though we don't know what it is, and it's true.
For a reason.
I also mentioned about leadership in here, and I think that that's lost a lot of times when leaders of troops have to send people into harm's way, that they suffer a lot of anxiety and physical and mental problems, and they keep that to themselves much more because you're a colonel or you're a lieutenant or something like that, and
I think that's changed a lot.
Well, I think it's changed every decade we go above. I think reach out. I think it gets better, but I think it's also something that's forgotten that even civilian leaders that give certain orders or decide on certain things, they suffer a lot, but they just won't let it out. So I mean, it's not an easy decision for certain people. It makes you think.
Well,
it's not just
all I can think of is in the Iran war, when the religious leaders were giving people a medal, and telling them that this medal would protect them from the machine guns, and sending them forth with a wooden rifle to,
One of the big things is being brave doesn't mean not having to ask for help. And one of the big things that the deceased vets came through with is ask for help. You deserve it. You've been through tougher situations. A lot of them will use, some type of language and say, listen, you made it through that junk over there. You can ask for help here. It's part of the deal. So ask it and get it. You deserve it. And not only by getting it, you're also helping the person that's giving it. Because that person that wants to help you, they're going to learn a lot of lessons about compassion
Get some
and giving.
insight, and then they're able to use that insight they got from you to work with others.
Yep, and you deserve it. So they say, go out and ask for it.
Well, that's something we stress on this show regularly, that if you're going to ask for a spiritual healing, you have to ask for it. They don't, normally the spiritual side doesn't push it on you because you have free will.
Right.
You have to ask for it.
You have to ask for it. And even though we as physical people might tend to push our help on people that don't want it,
Right. You have to be
it works
open
better
to
if
it.
you ask.
Another thing is, it's people call me a hero, but I don't feel like a hero. That's a big one that people have. And I asked that question, what came through was, they want you to realize that the civilian looks at you as a hero because what you have done, you're sacrificed, the time that you put in for our country, and to us, you are a hero. To you're thinking, I just did my job. This is what I'm trained for. But you have to take it from the perspective of the civilian, because we're the ones that are welcoming you as a hero or want to thank you.
You saved them.
And that's how we feel. So they want the veterans to be open to the experiences and thoughts of the people around them.
Especially with a lot of the vets who have passed on now, because Vietnam was so long ago. But I mean, how were
World War II.
How were they received when they came home?
Exactly.
They were spat on.
Right.
It was an entirely different thing than World War II or Korea.
Right. So they want the vets now to say, listen, when someone says you're a hero or you're my hero,
Accept it.
and you've done something, accept it and say, thank you, you're welcome. You know what I mean? Because it makes that civilian feel good, and we're all very proud of our people, our servicemen, and it's one little way for us to show that.
I find people are much more aware of that. I go into Lowe's and Home Depot, and they give us discounts. So I take out my veterans card, and people are like, "Oh, thank you for serving." It's common. I mean, it's such a vast change of mentality in
Tell you, my son loves it when he gets on the plane when he has his uniform on and people start buying him drinks.
Free drinks.
He loves it.
There you go. He deserves it. Why not?
Right.
And so every little bit helps. And you know, another really important thing is on this whole thing is community. We have a community here, and our loved ones go across overseas or something, and they come back. The community has to support the servicemen and the servicemen's families, and the families. And vets have to support other vets. That's another thing that came through that was very important. If a vet reaches out, another vet really has to help them. And they did it the big way with the book. They came from the other side
this book.
and helped this way. But so it's important if someone reaches out to help them.
Have you ever walked into the Veterans Administration and showed it to people?
I have talked to some people in some VAs down in Alabama and Arkansas, and they've given it out to some doctors down there and stuff.
Well, that's where I'm going, Alabama. That's why I said to you, I'm leaving tomorrow for Alabama for my son's graduation from flight school. And I'd love to have some of these, or I wish I'd known you would come on. You were dealing with this book here. I would have asked you to bring in half a dozen just so I could have given them to
I wish I had known.
chiefs or colonels or something like that. People are actually involved with seeing what people are going through.
Right.
You know.
And like I said, it's not
Chaplains.
It's not an end-all thing, but if the vets
Insight.
it's a conversation opener.
Right.
And I think what people say is the vets that I've gotten feedback that have read it, they said there are some really golden tidbits in there where it really made you think.
Well, I have my thought is that this would be maybe particularly geared to veterans, but I think anybody with a trauma or loss, traffic accidents, murders, anything.
Right.
This would, why me? Well,
Right.
this helps you put that thought
Well,
in
it's the same
perspective.
thing. How do you talk to someone that just lost a loved one? Same way, how do you talk to someone that just lost a service member? You know what I mean? Or how do you tell a child? I mean, those are some of the questions that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask.
So it's more universal than just for veterans, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right. But I wanted to ask some tough questions that hadn't been asked before. Try to get some real answers. And vets talk to vets. So
Sure.
I thought it was very interesting. Some of their personal stories in here are very interesting. And it's not all, serious. They have a lot of funny stories that people have. And, when you work and live together in those environments, it can be chaotic, but so the comedy can kind of run strong when the bullets are flying around. And that's what it sounds like when some of their stories come through. So they like, and you could see actually not the conflict, but the competition between some of the different
branches
of service. There's one in particular I thought was great. It was World War II, and they were on one of the islands, and one of the servicemen was a Marine, and the other one was Army.
Yeah.
And in the book, they taught me a lot of things that I didn't know before, but a lot of the services work together.
Sure.
So they were in a conflict, they were in a battle, and they were doing the fight, and after the battle and the fight and stuff, they were getting ready to disembark the area and stuff like that, and the Marines came up to the Army guy and said, you fought great back there, Marine. And the guy looked at him and said, I'm not a Marine, I'm Army. And they said, no, you fought like a Marine back there. So they laughed and they went their separate ways.
Sure,
but
Joe's book, Always Connected, for veterans. Deceased Vets Give Guidance from the Other Side, by Joe Higgins. I'm Ken Demers, thanking you from Psychoholistic Spotlight. And if you have questions, suggestions, comments, we would welcome them. 728-355-9. We would also welcome anyone that would like to be a volunteer on the show. We do it on Monday evenings, and it's always a pleasure talking to people and We have a nice night. And 728